So the mile test, or a variation of it, will usually be a staple in our testing protocols. So we use the mile test for is we use it to pull an MAS, or what's called or what's the long version of that is a max aerobic speed, which is how fast you move in meters per second while staying aerobic. We consider it kind of an aerobic test, even though your heart rate gets pretty high as you go through a mile. It gets up in the 180s, especially if it's a max mile, like you're really giving it all you got. It gets up into the high 180s, maybe 190s. So even though your heart rate gets pretty high, we call it aerobic because your aerobic base has to be pretty well developed to run well in this, to test well in this. So your aerobic base has to be there. A mile is technically 1,609 meters because we like the operating meters. But it's 1,600 on a track. That's fine for our purposes. Like the 9 meters, like that's the difference between a second or two. Either way, it's fine. So if you're running on a track, it's 4 laps on an outdoor track. If you're in lane 1, around 8 laps on an indoor track again in lane 1. If you don't have a track, you can use some GPS technology to map out a route that's a mile long. I would prefer that be, our last point here. I would prefer that to be a flat road or mostly flat. A lot of times, if you have a fitness watch, that can track the elevation. So, if you did have a few hills or you have a lot of hills, and you went out and ran that mile, and maybe you can send us the elevation data, and we can say, okay, this mile number is this, but if you look at these rises and these drops, like, this is actually a pretty good mile. And lastly, kind of an old school way of measuring out, a mile if you don't have any other means is kind of an odometer in a car, where you can set it to trip A and pull the car up to where you want to start, set the trip A, clear it out, and then drive until it reads a mile and mark that somehow. And that could be your mile route if you don't have any other way of calculating it. So this is the mile. Like I said, it's a staple in many of our testing protocols. And you may see this, but if you have a track, here's what you do. If you don't have a track, here are some options as well. So yeah, it's the mile.